Good morning, Bucknutters. It's Tuesday, June 9th, 2015. I am Dan Rubin. This is the Bucknuts Morning Five-ish. In just a minute, we will be joined by the Dean of Midwest Recruiting, Bill Kurelic, to chronicle the fact that Michigan State has made a recruiting surge like they haven't in many years, maybe ever. Bill breaks it down and lets you know exactly how much of a threat Michigan State is becoming on the recruiting trail when it comes to Ohio State. Speaking of which, we're also going to talk about the unchartered waters Ohio State is about to navigate between now and signing day. They've never had a recruiting approach like this and this kind of leverage. I think it's going to be some interesting times on the recruiting front. Got some comments on that. Sit back and enjoy another edition of the Bucknuts Morning Five-ish. It's become pretty clear that Ohio State has a laser-keen focus when it comes to recruiting and their own opinions on prospects. The amount of time they put in recruiting Austin Mack, they believe he's one of the top few receivers in the country, regardless of his ranking. I think the 24/7 Sports Composite has him in the 13 overall range. So that's where we come to this point in recruiting. Between now and signing day, there are so many big-time hat dance types out there, and I think Ohio State is clearing space or holding space so they can be in the mix for some serious hat dances, and that's not something they've done in the past. Sure, even under Meyer recently, they've held on and won out for guys like Von Bell, who did a hat dance on signing day a couple of years ago. But generally speaking, especially in the Trussell era, that was not Ohio State's bag to get involved in those kind of big-time battles. If you look at it now, they are in great position with several big-time receivers, your Benjamin Victors and your Nate Craig Myers or Nate Myers Craig or Nate Craig Mellencamp, those types, and they're going to be in the mix to the very end. You got Rashawn Gary, the number one player in the country, that are always going to be in the mix for, despite what you hear elsewhere. What makes it so interesting is, keep in mind, before signing day, something's going to take place. It's called the football season, which is a lot more marketing for your program. This time last year, did you think Ezekiel Elliott was the best running back in the country? We may have hoped so. We didn't know. Now we know. Keep in mind all that's going to be revealed about the team between now and then and how appealing that will be to big-time prospects. If Ohio State goes out and has the season even close to what we're thinking about, just imagine what level of marketing that's going to be stacked on top of last year. If you were one of the best players in the country and you were holding out and you got to see everybody play and you read the mock draft projections and watched everybody win these games, where would you want to go? I rest my case. Here comes the Dean.
When Jim Harbaugh was hired at Michigan, many felt it was game on when it comes to Ohio State versus the Wolverines, and that includes recruiting. But it's actually another school up north that is causing a bit of a stir, and that is Michigan State, as the Spartans, with a flurry of commitments this past weekend, have risen to number 6 in the country in the 24/7 Sports recruiting rankings. The Buckeyes check in at number 2, very close behind Florida State for the number 1 spot after Austin Mack committed to Ohio State over the weekend. But nonetheless, Michigan State is giving Ohio State a bit of a run for their money when it comes to the Big Ten recruiting rankings. The Spartans have 5 prospects on their commitment list that had scholarship offers from Ohio State, those being defensive end Josh King and defensive end Austin Robertson, as well as wide receiver Justin Lane, defensive back Dimitri Vance, and offensive lineman Theo Lacusa, though none of those prospects were really prospects that Ohio State was pressing very hard for. And as I mentioned, the Buckeyes still have a good-sized lead over the Spartans and currently are number 2 in the country. But today offers an interesting situation, as a prospect that Ohio State definitely wants to have in the recruiting class is visiting Michigan State. That is tight end Luke Farrell from Perry, Ohio. Farrell has continued to tell me that Ohio State, as well as Penn State and Boston College, are very close at the top of his list, but he is going to visit Michigan State and he also will likely visit Notre Dame, and then most likely finish his summer visits with a trip to Ohio State for Friday Night Lights before announcing his college choice in early August. But certainly the situation with Luke Farrell is one worth watching today as he makes an unofficial visit to Michigan State. The 6'6" and 240-pound Farrell would be a great addition to the Ohio State class, joining tight end Jake Hausman to give the Buckeyes a tremendous duo in the class at tight end. And of course, Bucknuts.com will keep a close eye on the situation as Farrell makes the visit to Michigan State. And as I mentioned again, Ohio State's class is now checking in at a very close number 2 in the country behind Florida State. And I expect in the end the Buckeyes will finish with the number 1 recruiting class in the Big Ten, as well as possibly the number 1 class in the country. That is still not out of the question, but still, for the Spartans, it is going to end up as a very, very good recruiting class when all is said and done for Mark D'Antonio. It just won't be quite as good as the Ohio State Buckeyes.